Thank you very much. And I think it was a good idea that you stand up because really I would have been afraid that the chair would burn. Okay? Thank you very much. Very impressive, very touching, very inspiring. I have a bunch of comments myself, but I'll save them until our commentators make their own comments. I will say only one thing. Okay? When you said that people are going to Davis in their private jets, and they are sitting in air-conditioned rooms talking about poverty, like the room where we are right now. Let me tell you one small thing that ECS tried to do. Okay, poverty is focused on Upper Egypt. Okay, last year actually we had a conference in Upper Egypt. We went there, which is not done often in Egypt, to talk about poverty, where poverty is. We went to Asyut, which is one of the poorest governorates in Egypt, to talk about the poverty issues and to talk about entrepreneurship for those young people there who are extremely talented, naturally talented, but not ever receiving the rights. They don't know what's happening. We always talk about their issues in Cairo, not where they are. So we did that, and we intend to repeat it as well. And then, like I said, I have a bunch of points, but I'm going to resist my position as chair of the session to say them. I'll try and be nice. Okay. Let me start by Mr. Samuel Kamara with his commentary.
Good morning. And let me join the chair in thanking our colleague, because we can call him our colleague, because we are all in the same profession. Well, thank you very much for your point, and also thank you for the hard work that you put into producing this book. Let me start from the closing slide. If you have been listening, thank you. And I think we have been listening, even before your book came out. In particular, the African Development Bank, we have been listening. Even before the current president, Dr. Adesina, took the reins of the institution. The bank as an institution, and as an institution for Africans, we have been listening. I have noted a quite number of points, very interesting. Maybe before I go into what I intend to say, let me just comment on a few things. One, it's the way we have painted globalization, in particular the impact, because your first slide indicates that there is this massive migration as a result of globalization. I think we miss, especially as an economics, when you talk about averages, you miss certain details. And we have to also, dig deep and unbundle and see what is inside the details. I think that the issue about globalization is not really the issue itself. It's how did we handle globalization? How did we? And as we can see, the drivers of migration are not necessarily, not all of them as a result of globalization. You have the pull factors. The pull factors. And then you have the push factors. What are propelling people to move? Extreme poverty. Exclusion. This is important. Exclusion. Now, we talk about the benefits of globalization. Now, who have been excluded from benefiting from globalization? Now, lack of access to decent jobs. Globalization came, we have this massive economic empowerment, but who benefited? Conflict is another factor. Of course, climate change, which you also mentioned. I can give you an example. For me, I'm working in Kenya for nearly 5 years. I've been into the rural communities. I know, I have seen it, the impact of climate change, forcing people to move. The conflict created by changes in climate change. So I think we have to really, unbundle. And then we will talk about the pull factors. What is happening in Europe? What is happening in America? Why, our brothers and sisters, being pulled to go into those areas. Now, you mentioned about that donors do not work together. I think we have gone a long way. Yes, maybe in the past, maybe before I joined, these institutions, the World Bank and the African Development Bank, maybe those days, there was not much coordination and harmonization. But I think we can, I can say that we have made progress. Because these days, especially the programs that we fund and implement, there is a lot of harmonization and coordination. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that we coordinate with other development partners to make sure that we don't duplicate. And of course, this is also in harmony with the government. So on that side, I think we've really gone far. Again, on your chart, that this massive from Africa to Europe, and studies have shown that about 69% of Africans don't want to move. And and also studies have shown that lately we have this reverse migration. We see Africans coming back to Africa, and I can say I'm one of them. After working in the World Bank in Washington, one day I said, you know what? I think it's enough, it's enough. I can contribute to my continent. And then I started looking for opportunities, and I joined the World Bank, the African Development Bank. So there's a lot of opportunities happening in Africa. And this is where we really need to change the narrative. The narrative. I got the privilege to watch a clip of your presentation where you've mentioned about the role of the media. The narrative about Africa needs to change. Africa is moving. There are a lot of opportunities in Africa now. And that's the narrative that we need to change, because these days, most of the coverage on Africa is about poverty, but let's also shift. So if the West can also assist in that area in changing the narrative, that can prevent Africans from moving outside Africa, and then also even the ones in the diaspora can also come. Now, let me stop there, and then just, if you allow me, if I have more time, just 1 or 2 minutes on what we are doing as the African Development Bank. Thank you very much for alluding to basically the broader strategy of the African Development Bank these days with the coming on board of Dr. Adesina. Now, we have the high fives: the Light Up, Empower Africa, the Feed Africa, Integrate Africa, Industrialize Africa, and improve the life of the people of Africa. And then you mentioned about agriculture. And then for him, he said, agriculture is the way to go. Is the way to go. But however, he said we have to change the paradigm. Because if statistics have shown, or studies have shown that the average age of a farmer in Africa is about 60 years. And I've seen that. When I was working in Kenya, we have this agricultural project in the western part of Kenya. I went there. Who do I see? Mostly elderly people. And then I asked the question, where are the youths? They told me, well, they are in Nairobi, they are in Kisumu, some of them are running matatus, and matatus is like small minibuses. So I was shocked. So our president said we have to change the way we do the business in agriculture. We have to transform, make agriculture as a business venture. As a business venture, we focus on transforming the sector so that we make it attractive for the youth. In what way? Now, de-risking the business process, de-risking, so that it becomes attractive, not only for the youth, but also for financiers. And then also remove some of the bottlenecks. I will not go into the details of it, but in a nutshell, basically what we are, we agree with you that agriculture is the way to go. However, we also have this strategy on industrialization, because you see, industrialization is also key for Africa. It's also key, because if you want to create jobs, industrialization should be, one of the sectors to focus on. So in our strategy, we have the agricultural transformation, and then we have the industrialization, and then in between, this is where we sandwich, the IT. Because again, our mindset is on how can you encourage youth into agriculture. And then you mentioned about women empowerment. Thank you, Professor. Again, I think we are well aligned. We have quite a number of programs in ensuring that we empower the women. Because, they are the, what should I say, the driving forces. In homes, in the business world, everywhere. So we try to see how we can empower them. So we have in our programs, women empowerment initiatives. For instance, like the AFAWA. So basically, how we can expand financial inclusions to the less privileged, to the women in the rural setting, and also to youth. And then also in our programs, we have what we call gender mainstreaming. Basically, through our programs, we have opportunities. Now, how can you prioritize in terms of provision of those opportunities to women? So these are some of the issues where we focus on. So thank you, and if you allow me again, I can come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the interesting comments. And of course, women are the heart of the world, but it took men many, many years to realize that. They are realizing it now, and maybe we can fix whatever you destroyed over the years. But anyways, we'll try. Dr. Ibrahim, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Dr. Abla. I'm very glad to be at the center once again. I'd like to thank Dr. Dembitzer for his very interesting presentation and for the slides that I have seen, and thanks to Mr. Kamara also for his comments, with which I largely agree. My comments will take up migration, the issues raised in relation to Africa and Europe, and then how the issues should be addressed, and some of the policy advice that you provided at the end. I'm in agreement with Mr. Kamara about the migration narrative, because in fact, migration is not that colossal. Statistics show that there was 3% of the world population as migrants at the beginning of the 20th century. There is now 3.1%. The problem really is that Europe was a region of origin. It sent migrants in the 19th century and early 20th century from Ireland, from Italy, from Central Europe, but now Europe receives migrants. And this is why the issue, and in Europe there is enough power to project onto the international scene the importance of cross-border migration. In fact, Africans migrate within Africa and not out of Africa. In fact, from West Africa, only 3% of West African migrants are in Europe. They remain in West Africa. Most of the African continent, migration is within. In fact, in the last few years, migration has been reduced tremendously I have here figures. Excuse me. I have across the Mediterranean. 1 million in 2015, 141,000 in 2018. Of course, the cost was very high because after the 1 million in 2015, there were 3,700 deaths, 3 per thousand. In 2018, because of successful European policies, they were reduced, but you had 1.5%, not 3 per thousand, 1.5%. So in fact, migration from Africa to Europe is not that huge. In fact, from Tunisia, net migration from Tunisia between 2004 and 2014 was 14,000 per year. Mostly, in fact, before 2011, went to Libya. So there's, from Morocco, in fact, Morocco is receiving some migrants. Not to this huge extent from other regions of Africa. I do not use the concept of sub-Saharan Africa because it's divisive. Africa, there is West Africa, there is East Africa, there is North Africa, there is Southern Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, we have been used to using the concept introduced, in fact, by colonialism in order to distinguish between North Africa and other parts of Africa. But in fact, if, for instance, Morocco is being made as a country of transit to there are 60,000 African migrants from other regions in Morocco. This does not make Morocco, but it legitimizes the policies of the European Union when it comes to stopping migration. So I don't think it is. I agree with the core message of your book and of your presentation. I completely agree with this. However, to make migration one of the big problems of the day, it's not. In fact, it is a scapegoat. In fact, the countries most hostile to migrants do not have migrants at all. Hungary, there are no migrants in Hungary. Poland, there are no migrants in Poland. You see, when in Switzerland, in 2016, they carried out a referendum against migration to stop, by the way, migration from Germany, not migration from Africa. It was about medical doctors coming from Germany and working in Switzerland. The cantons who refused to restrict migration were the cantons with the largest volumes of migrants. Those who approved restricting migration were the cantons where there are no migrants. Yeah, you see? So, in fact, this is about the narrative. Yeah? In fact, the narrative about migration hides or intends to hide the real reasons for which fascism is growing, which is inequality. Inequality is growing tremendously. Look at the labor share in GDP in Europe. It is decreasing continuously. And within labor, the top 1% is appropriating more and more of GDP at the expense of the lower 50%. This is the reason why the oldest workers in Britain voted for Brexit, or the white workers voted for Trump in the United States. In fact, it is very useful to vehicle migration or migrants as the culprits, when in fact they are not the culprits. In fact, migrants from South America, from Mexico and Central America, migration has been reduced continuously since the global economic crisis. I mean, of course, the latest caravans from Honduras and something, it comes out very well in the news, and of course it occupies television and news, but in fact there is no such huge migration in Europe. Look at the reaction in 14 and 15 to the so-called huge flows of refugees from Syria to Europe. In fact, the real crisis was in this region. 1 million plus in Lebanon, population of 4 million, 700,000 in Jordan, which has received refugees from everywhere, in a population of 8 million, whereas in Europe, 1 million in 504 million. And now the issue has almost disappeared. All migration specialists in Europe have refused to term this as a migration crisis. No one has accepted this because in fact there was no crisis. And now it has disappeared from public discourse because Germany is a huge economy. It could of course absorb these migrants. So this is only, and of course migration, of course it will continue. Migration is a natural phenomenon, and it is related, of course, to push and pull, but not only. It is related, in fact, to the functioning of the global economy. The global economy needs, you need low-skilled workers in order for the economy to function. You need also highly skilled workers that your education systems cannot produce at the speed needed. So you need them to adjust the labor market. And this is why you have this, and migration will continue. There is no, and in fact, it's very fortunate that migration continues. Imagine a world without migration. Imagine a world where Egypt is there are only Egyptians, France only French, Sierra Leone only Sierra Leones, Kenya only Kenyans. It would be a very dull world, in fact. Of course, the functioning of the global economy. Very well, Dr. Demitz mentioned the subsidies of the US to agriculture and the common agricultural policy of the European Union. You know, subsidies of the US government to cotton growers in the United States has as a result that where is cotton grown in Africa? For instance, in Burkina Faso. So what Mali. So what happens? They cannot compete. So they leave their field, they go to the city. You can address the question of conditions of work, of conditions, the reception, the hostility, the xenophobia that exists, but you also need to address economic policies because these really are at the origin. Economic policies have resulted in greater and greater disparities. And these disparities have occasioned the backlash against the other. And of course also the economic processes and the fragmentation of the working class as well. Those who were more, working class was more integrated in the 1960s. Now it has been fragmented. And this also has resulted in, for instance, voters of left-wing parties that going to the right. Finally, let me address the question of agriculture. Yes, agriculture. But again, it's not enough. You have to industrialize because you need productivity. You need higher productivity. You need to address the question of employment, but improving conditions of life at the same time. So you need to combine between economic growth on the one hand and distribution on the other hand by creating employment. And I think this is what you say when you say efficiency and social justice. It's about distribution, really. So you cannot really, in economic theory in any case, you cannot advance, you cannot develop with agriculture alone. And agriculture, with higher and higher productivity agriculture, you have smaller and smaller labor force that goes to agriculture. So what do you do with the rest? The most developed economies now have very low shares. 3% of the labor force go to agriculture. So I think you have to combine. Of course, you need to develop agriculture. This is for sure, but you need to also develop other sectors of the economy. I've already dealt with neoliberal economic policy because I think these are and you need also to address the international institutional system. Look, for instance, now 20 years ago, WTO was and trade liberalization was the cure to everything. Now the US is protectionist. So now you are going back on this. And finally, director generals of FAO or WTO, they don't really make policies. Policies are made by states and by powerful states. So this is where you really have to address. Director general, have a little field where he or she can move, but it's essentially policies and states, and the policies that are advocated by states. Thank you very much.